I always thought my grandparents' secret recipe was just a family treasure. Something simple, warm, and delicious that connected generations around a dinner table. Growing up, every family gathering smelled of that same aroma. The thick sauce simmering for hours, the sound of the ladle clinking against the pot, and my grandmother humming softly as if guarding a holy secret. It wasn't written anywhere, at least not the real version. She always said the paper copy was just for guests. The real recipe lived in her heart. When my grandparents passed away, I was devastated. I inherited a few of their old belongings, a set of photographs, a small wooden chest, and that famous recipe book. It looked ordinary, cracked brown leather, torn edges, and stains from years of cooking. I kept it mostly for nostalgia, but never thought much about it. That was, until early this year, when my life started falling apart. I'd lost my job. Bills were piling up. I was searching through old things to maybe sell online. Anything of value. That's when I found the recipe book again, tucked under some old clothes in a box I hadn't opened in years. I opened it absent-mindedly, more out of comfort than curiosity. But something strange caught my eye. On one of the pages, the page for the family stew, there were faint pencil marks between the lines of ingredients. They looked like smudged dots and tiny dashes, almost like someone had written over them long ago and erased it. I thought maybe it was just old ink or oil stains, but something about the pattern looked too deliberate. I took a closer look under my phone's flashlight and realized it wasn't anti-random. The marks were almost evenly spaced, and a few looked like small arrows pointing to certain letters in the instructions. It didn't make sense. Why would my grandmother mark a cooking recipe like that? Curiosity got the best of me. I took photos of the page and uploaded them to my laptop. Then I adjusted the contrast and zoomed in. And that's when I noticed faint handwriting, invisible to the naked eye, unless you changed the brightness. It wasn't just one or two words. It was a sentence. Look beneath the roots where time began. I froze. What did that even mean? Beneath the roots? I texted my mom about it, and she laughed it off, saying Grandma was probably just doodling. But something inside me refused to let it go. My grandparents were never random people. They did everything with purpose. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about what roots could mean. Family roots, a tree, the old family house. The next morning I drove back to their property, a place we hadn't visited since they passed. The garden was still there, wild and overgrown, with one massive oak tree standing tall in the middle. That tree had always been there, long before I was born. My grandfather used to sit under it with his pipe, reading the newspaper every evening. If there were roots where time began, this had to be it. I started digging near the base of the tree. At first it felt ridiculous. I thought maybe I was losing it, chasing some cryptic message left by an old woman who just liked puzzles. But after about half an hour, my shovel hit something solid. It wasn't a rock. It made a hollow sound. My heart started pounding. I dug faster, brushing away the dirt until I saw the edge of a metal box. Old, rusty, and sealed tight. It was small, about the size of a shoebox, but heavy. I carefully pulled it out and set it on the ground. My hands were shaking as I forced it open. Inside was an envelope, yellowed with age, and a small pouch. The envelope had my name written in my grandmother's handwriting. The pouch contained old coins, some tarnished jewelry, and what looked like old currency notes from the 1940s. But the envelope. That was what made my breath catch. It read, "If you found this, it means our story has reached you, and that you were ready to know the truth." There were several pages inside, handwritten by both my grandmother and grandfather. As I read, tears welled up in my eyes. They wrote about how, during the 1950s, my great-grandfather had worked as a treasurer for a local trading company. During the partition and chaos that followed, he had hidden a portion of the company's gold and documents, fearing they'd be stolen or lost. He never retrieved them. Instead, he passed down clues through family traditions, including the recipe. My grandparents had discovered the secret decades later but chose to keep it hidden, fearing greed or conflict would destroy the family. They wanted the next generation to find it only when truly needed. When the family was at a crossroads. The letter ended with directions to a safe deposit key hidden inside the recipe book's spine. I immediately flipped through it. And sure enough, tucked between the leather binding was a small, old key, nearly invisible. The next day, I went to the bank mentioned in the letter. It still existed, though under a different name. After a lot of verification and paperwork, the staff finally located a sealed deposit box registered under my great-grandfather's name. Inside were old bearer bonds, documents of ownership for some long-forgotten property, and a small gold bar, probably worth more than I'd ever earned in my life. I sat there in shock, surrounded by the weight of generations that had led to this moment. This wasn't just about money. It was a message, a reminder that sometimes the most valuable things are hidden not in plain sight, but in the traditions we take for granted. When I told my family, it didn't go as smoothly as I hoped. My uncles started arguing about who had the right to what. Some accused me of fabricating the story. My mother was torn between pride and guilt. It was chaos. Exactly what my grandparents had feared. For weeks, I regretted even opening that book. But then I reread the last page of my grandmother's letter. It said, "We trusted that whoever finds this will understand that the fortune is not the goal. The truth is." Those words hit me harder than anything else. I realized what she meant. The fortune wasn't just the gold or the bonds. It was the story. The truth of who we were, where we came from, and the legacy of resilience they'd carried through generations. Eventually, I decided to handle it differently. Instead of dividing the assets, I used part of the value to restore the old family house and turn it into a heritage home, something my grandparents would forever loved. I set up a small foundation in their name, helping local families preserve their history and traditions before they were lost to time. Now, whenever I walk into that kitchen, the same recipe still cooks on the stove. The same smell fills the air. But it feels different. It's no longer just food. It's a bridge across time. I can almost hear my grandparents' laughter, their soft voices echoing through the walls, proud that the secret they hid for decades had finally found its purpose. Sometimes, late at night, I look at the recipe book sitting on the counter, the faded ink still visible. I think about how a few dots and dashes in an old cookbook changed everything. Not just for me, but for my entire family's future. It's strange how life works. You spend years chasing success, money, or happiness, when sometimes the greatest treasure has been sitting right in front of you all along, waiting for you to notice the clues. So now, when people ask me what the recipe tastes like, I smile. I tell them it tastes like history. Sweet, comforting, and just a little bit mysterious. But more than anything, it tastes like home.